Hello and welcome back to another video. And on today's video, we're going to be doing an interview with Eric Brock, who is the CEO of Ondas Holdings. If you do enjoy the video, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more content like this. And drop down below in the comment section your favourite part from this interview. Enjoy. Right, Eric, thank you very much and welcome back onto the show. I appreciate you taking your time out of your day to join me today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Jay. Thanks for having me again.
No worries, thanks, Eric. And just before we start as well, I just want to say thank you for the appeal as well. It's been well taken on the market, hasn't it? Everyone was loving the merch very much, wasn't they?
Yeah, it's great. This is a lot of fun, and it is a good way to communicate. So thanks for the opportunity.
No, I appreciate it. So first question, Eric. You've built a strong relationship with retail investors through transparency and accessibility. As Ondas scales, how important is it for you to keep maintaining that connection with shareholders?
Yeah, sure. A great place to start. So I'll give you the short answer. And engaging with all shareholders is critical, of course. And anybody who invests in Ondas is going to be important to me. And that's particularly true of individual investors. So, I've thought about this a bunch, and my orientation here really comes back to the first day of business school. I went to the University of Chicago. Going back to 1995. At Chicago, it's well known they have all these Nobel laureates, particularly in economics, and they sort of give you the big picture at the outset. So really on day one. And this the tenet from Milton Friedman has always resonated with me. It was said that he wrote a paper on this. It was published in the New York Times back in 1970. So the duty of a company is to perform for its investors, right? That's the first duty. And really, if you pull it back, it's the only duty of a company. And of course, that's as the chairman and CEO. That puts me in the spot that I am in. So it's one of the most important tenets of business. It really resonates with me, and I do believe it in the deepest parts of my soul. So, and at the end of the day, it's not really a hard concept to grasp, but if you can wake up every day remembering this, it makes everything else a lot easier. So, the other thing I would say, Jamie, is I hear this a lot, the term retail investors, and there's nothing wrong with it, but you'll see that I very rarely use it, and not to be overly ideological. I prefer to call them individual investors, and it is nomenclature. But as investors, you don't go to the store and pick up stocks off the shelf. You're not going to Amazon and seeing what's on sale. So I think you get my point. And I'm a bit of a stickler on this. But all investors matter. I do have to admit that individual investors are even more special. I really can relate. The money you entrust in me and my team is important. It's hard earned, and we need to deploy it productively. It's critically important. So we're going to continue to be very transparent. We want to communicate with investors. It's really important for you to know what we're doing. And then, of course, it's also important for us to, as we are communicating, what we're really doing is putting out, our targets and objectives. And this is a way for us to be accountable. Right, it's important for management teams to be accountable, and if we're telling you what we're going to do, and if we don't deliver on it, then we have to sort of explain why we haven't. So I think that's a really important way to build trust, because we have to do this together. Let me make one other point. It's great to have this engagement we have with individual investors. At the same time, it's really important for us to deepen and broaden our investor base. And as you are well aware, we've been doing that. And what I'm talking about specifically is building the institutional investor base. And so you've seen that grow over the course of the last 3 to 6 months, and I think you're going to see even more of that. So that's important, right? To get those long-term investors to make provide the base for the company, and we're going to be very transparent with them as well. It's the same communications, really.
Yeah, and I think like you say, you're very different to most CEOs with how you deal with individual investors, because you'll take so much time out of your day to talk to people like myself, people like a lot of people on X. I know it can't all be sweet talking, because I can imagine there's a lot of people that are sending you messages all the time, and it can probably get overwhelming, can't it? Because there's probably not just 3 or 4 of us. I can imagine there's hundreds of people messaging you now, and I can imagine it gets a lot.
there's quite a bit, and it's fine. Like I said, I do enjoy doing it, and it is important. But what I find, Jay, is that this as a chart goes up and down, the kind of the tenor of the DMs I get changes, right?
I was wondering that.
I do find that can be a contraindicator, right? So at the when the stock's down a bunch, people are concerned. Maybe people are saying not such nice things, but that's okay. I can handle that, and I have the context as I understand it. Sort of, what they say is the narrative follows price, and when you're never as good as your best day, you're never as bad as your worst. We just have to wake up every day and focus on delivering the plan, and if we do that, our investors will be happy. And make one more point on that. We're really building the company for investors, not traders. And but traders are great, right? They have a role to play in the financial markets. We want to create opportunities for them, but at the end of the day, it's really about building a substantial equity value in our company.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I can imagine I see some of the stuff, so I can imagine like that I have to talk to people about, so I can imagine what you receive.
Yeah.
So into some of the juicy stuff then, Eric. What are the top drivers that you need to happen for Ondas to achieve that $370 million revenue in 2026?
Yeah, so that's obviously a big step function change in our growth here, and the simple answer is we have to execute the plan. And you've seen us spend a lot of time and energy building out the infrastructure at Ondas Autonomous Systems, and that's going to be critical. It's as I'm sure you know, but I'll say it anyway. Is the leadership team led by Oshie Lagasse? We've put that number up, and of course, there's various people with various responsibilities to build up. Whether you're at Centrix or Roboteam or Aerobotics, etc. We all have our objectives, and we have to deliver and execute. I'll say this, that the team is really energized to do better, right? So let's see where we can take this, but the key thing will be for us to continue to put the leadership and the infrastructure for growth. And what we're really doing at OAS is building a platform to handle much higher revenue levels in business activities than that 375 million, right? We're building it for to be able to build a really substantial company over a 3 to 5 year period. We're going to keep making those investments.
And I guess on the back end of that, what do you think like the biggest risks to executing that type of revenue for 26 targets are? Like, how is yourself and management mitigating those type of things? For instance, like geopolitical stuff that's going on, etc., and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I don't see the geopolitical element as a risk. In fact, it's we make this point on the call. That only adds to the opportunity, both in particularly in the near term, and we are seeing that demand. There's more urgency in certain areas of our business to deliver for customers, so that's obviously good from a financial standpoint. And we have to make sure we're delivering for customers, because when they need something urgently, that has real implications. The same time that the geopolitics here only reinforce this massive investment cycle that we've talked so much about. You're starting to see that evidence, of course, right? So that's actually in motion. So from a risk standpoint, it really is about how we execute and deliver on the customer requirements. And again, it comes back to putting together that infrastructure at OAS and the leadership team, and then executing. So it's really that simple. It's all aspects of the business have to come together, and we've done a lot of work to prepare, and we feel really good about the outlook in the stake in the ground we put in there for 2026.
No, I think that's fair enough. And you ended 2025 with a $68.3 million backlog. And you said backlog should increase significantly in Q1. Mm-hmm. How much of that backlog do you expect to convert into 2026 revenue? And what are the biggest factors into playing into that, do you reckon?
Yeah, so the backlog that we ended last year with grew substantially, but at the same time, we've seen a strong order cadence in Q1, and I think that's going to persist. So that's going to add to the backlog. And of course, we've made some significant acquisitions. So we've grown our portfolio. And I think we were quite clear on the on the call that the backlog would grow significantly in Q1. And, we weren't able to, because Q1 is not over, to give you that number. And a lot of it depends on, how and when we close these deals that are pending, the definitive agreements we have. But we think most of them do come in, probably early in Q2. So we'll be able to talk about a backlog that's at least multiples of what we ended 2025 in with. And that really gives us tremendous visibility for the year. The bulk of the backlog we had at year end will be pulled through revenue this year. We're going to try to get as much as we can in the first and second quarter. And then as we build the backlog, you'll see some of the programs are multi-year, and we've already got orders on, because the only thing in the backlog that you see us report are actual orders, not necessarily program wins, right? So when you win a program, we'll often announce that and say, hey, this is, we won this business, we're going to deliver it over a period of time, and then the customers will give you purchase orders against that program. So it's really those orders that that turn into backlog and that get pulled through revenue. And then once you finish that order, there's a sequencing where the customer says, okay, there's another phase, or there's an expansion, then you get a new order, then that goes in the backlog. So the point is that we've said it. I'll just say it again. We do have quite a bit of visibility on the goals for this year.
No, I think that's there. Thank you very much. And how has your acquisition framework changed over the last year in terms of target quality, valuation discipline, and integration planning?
So there's not, in terms of process and objectives and criteria, nothing's changed, right? We've been building up for this acquisition program really started in August, but we've been planning and had a vision and view of how the market would organize for 3 or 4 years prior. So what we did is we staffed the team beginning of 2025. Then we've been deepening it. So we have expertise across finance, legal, technology, customers, and end market requirements. We bring all that together, and that team just gets stronger. We've actually added to it, which I mentioned on the call, is the PMI activity. So post-merger integration, that's going to be critical to the successful execution of the operating plans we have when new companies come in. But in terms of criteria, I think it's the same thing. We're looking for massively accretive transactions. They add strategic value, they add customer roadmap, and there's system to systems benefits, as we've talked a lot about. And we get operating leverage, right? The companies that come in, when we plug them in, they should be growing faster than the models we underwrote when we made the deal. So that's that compounding of accretion that we argue for, and I think you're already seeing it, and I think we're going to get rewarded for that. So that's some context. The last thing I'll say, Jay, is that we are seeing that the quality is one word to say. So the maturity of the businesses that we're starting to see coming into our pipeline is improving, and I think we're able to do that because now we have scale. We certainly have the financial resources and the counterparties, right? Whenever you make an acquisition, somebody has to be willing to sell their company to you. The leadership teams have to want to join the platform. And as we've built that credibility that we can execute both on an integration, but also on the growth plan, and we've created a model for compounding equity value. And that's what these companies, when we were acquiring a company, they came together, at some point, prior, they put a lot of capital, a lot of sweat equity, and they wanted to build a business. And they wanted to generate incomes. They also want to generate equity upside. And when we're offering that to them in really a compounding model, the interest is actually, as I thought, is increasing dramatically. So it is, I'll say, for lack of a better term, the quality of what we're seeing, more mature companies, bigger companies, that really actually, under the Ondas umbrella are poised to perform even better. It's really good to see.
No, that's great, and that's fair as well, Eric. And as Ondas does keep expanding, are larger defense and technology firms increasingly becoming partners and the distribution channels, or are they becoming more competitive threats now? I know, obviously, when we see lots of Palantir, people like that, that's some really big relationships to have on. So I know that's easy, self-answered a little bit, but
Yeah, and this is a really important point, Jay. The whole thesis around our model is building scaled operations, right? And that leads to operating leverage, means we can grow faster, we can expand margins faster and be more profitable, and we can service customers better. So across the ecosystem, everybody wins. And the really important part of scale, and Palantir is a great example, but we have others. We've been building relationships. Some of them have come through the Ondas core, and others we're acquiring, right? So you've seen some logos, to highlight a few. We've got Lockheed Martin as a distributor and a partner in the field. We have Dedrone, an Axon company. Androl is a systems integrator and taking some of our capabilities, and there's others. Henschel, for example. We see partnerships and engagement with supply chain folks, right? Contract manufacturers, Flextronics, for example. And what you see is as Ondas builds scale with all those folks, we become a more attractive counterparty. So take Palantir, right? Palantir has a view around layered ISR, and of course, our AI tools are enabling this for customers. But for AI to be valuable for customers, you need data, right? So you need all these layers. Worldview is a great example. And so for Palantir to go work with dozens of small companies is very difficult, right? They don't get scale in their business. It means they have to put together. They know that their customers have to go, sort of do all the work you have to do to, agree to be a partner, right? So if you have a drone and you're the U.S. Army, and maybe you want to have all these different layers, and say there's 10 layers, you have to go to 10 companies. That means you have to go look at due diligence on 10 companies. You have to do testing. You have to do integration. All of that is very laborious, has risks, and it slows things down. So if you can put the layers together, for the customer, for folks like Palantir, everything happens more efficiently at higher quality. So, one thing to think about, Jay, is that, in the Palantir Worldview relationship, Palantir introduced Worldview to Ondas. Why is that? Well, Ondas had the layers, other valuable layers in that stack. Or domains, right? We also had the roadmap to add other critical, edge capabilities around ISR, and we had the financial platform to do it as well. So we present ourselves as an outstanding counterparty to Palantir, and that's true of the other. And you'll see even more partnerships like this as we move forward, because we're becoming a scaled operator with really valuable capabilities.
Yeah, and I think as Ondas gains more institutional support and anticipates in addition to the Russell 2K and other indices during 2026, should investors expect the pace of acquisitions to slow down over time, with more focus shifting towards scaling and integrating the existing portfolio? Or do you still think that Ondas is being in that firmly acquisition mode?
Yeah, so the short answer is we're going to continue with this strategy. It's not either we're going to just focus on the core or we're going to focus on the acquisitions. They both have to come together. So, I really emphasize this. This is a core plus strategic growth program, and one reinforces the other, right? The core can grow faster when we bring other capabilities, make us more relevant to customers, more relevant to industry partners in the ecosystem. We get the scale benefits from a financial standpoint. It just makes it all the more powerful. So we're going to do them both in parallel. And I think that I think we're as we're executing this, it's validating that the thesis around how the industry is going to organize is the right one. And again, I'll say this, I'll repeat it: the industry will only organize once, right? We've spent the better part of a decade or more in certain places building that technology stack. We've matured the technology stack. We're also maturing the operational stack, the regulatory and policy stack. All this is really, really critical. And the fact is, this cannot continue to be a cottage industry of a bunch of folks building technology. It has to be brought together, and it's an exceptional opportunity. So we're going to continue to execute.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And a couple on Ondas Capital. So Ondas Capital announced its first investments in a DFG, or Drone Fight Club, in December, but we haven't heard as much since. How are things progressing over there? Should investors expect to see more updates on Ondas Capital in the coming quarters?
Yeah, so let's recall, Ondas Capital and define it. So first, I want to say that it's doing a great job. We are supporting the ecosystem. Ondas Capital, a lot of our activities, particularly as you see us, marketing and building brand and awareness.
They've got a good team over there, haven't they?
They do. It's a great team, and they're doing really, really important work, establishing relationships and building awareness that we can leverage everywhere at what I'll call the Ondas mothership. So it's really important. At the same time, it's very difficult, right? Taking small companies, bringing them into, to globalize their businesses. And we want to do it the right way. You have to work inside regulatory and policy frameworks, and they're doing that. So we're making progress. And I think it's going to be, it's going to be very impactful in many ways that are visible to you as we're moving forward in 2026. At the same time, Ondas Capital is more than that, right? You've seen us make some important investments in companies like PDW, right? And they just announced that they closed their Series B, which we had anchored. We were we funded that in late 2025, but we've made investments in Rift. That's an important strategic partnership, Firestorm and others. And we've made a handful of public market investors that have relevance for our ecosystem, really strengthening relationships and supporting the growth of our sector, which I think is important. So we're going to continue to do that. And you can kind of think of Ondas Capital as a corporate VC/PE firm. However, I don't want to be labeled. We want the flexibility to do whatever's smart and is accretive to the business. And a lot of these are long-term investments. But I can tell you it is already adding tremendous value to the enterprise, and some of that's intangible. Some of it is tangible. We do think, to be very specific, one of the critical criteria is every investment we're making, we're expecting a substantial financial return in addition to all the strategic benefits.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for touching on that. Like I say, obviously there's some more stuff that I'll touch on, but I touched on stuff with James last year, and James is an incredible piece to that puzzle, and there's some great people over there for sure. With Worldview and the Palantir partnership, what do you expect this platform? When do you expect this platform to begin generating meaningful revenue, and what milestones should investors watch for as proof of traction?
So the short answer is immediately, and we do think there's going to be a relatively quick close on Worldview. So that means the revenue will be accruing to Ondas as we consolidate. But they're already engaged with Palantir, and one of the great things about Palantir, many great things, is that the technology integration and that development is shock. I don't want to use the term quick, but it's the cycles there, the development cycles are rapid. And so Worldview has been working with Palantir, and Ryan has talked about this on some of his public interviews. Ryan Hartman, the CEO, he's from design to functional product and service is very quick. So within 3 months, he's got actionable services he can deploy for important customers. The other thing about this relationship with Palantir, it is very substantive. This is not just us leveraging the technology. There's go-to-market benefits, right? So Palantir is very interested in helping us penetrate markets. And of course, that helps them in their broader business. So we're very aligned there. And as I already told you with Palantir, the benefits are also strategic. So, Palantir, again, they introduced us to Worldview. That's a very important point. So if we're working together to build that multi-domain layered ISR, I think we've got huge advantages, and a lot of the things we have on our roadmap will be accelerated. So I expect the financial impact to be significant, and you'll start to see that in Q2.
And I think that goes back onto this next question. So even since our last interview, you always use the term like system of systems, and you've spoken about building a full stack from low Earth orbit all the way down to surface and land. Why is that approach strategically more powerful than focused only on the individual products like before, like Iron Drone, Optimus, etc.?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, so listen, all of our technologies are designed to, perform standalone, right? So you can deploy Optimus, at a military base. You can deploy kind of, the Iron Drone system, at an airport or other critical location. You can have a stratospheric balloon just do, ISR. But at the same time, we know that the markets are going towards this layered ISR and the integration and the real leverage you get from autonomous systems and the intelligence, and which ultimately lead to decisions. Right, when you can shorten that by integrating them, you're really adding a lot of value to your customers. Right, you're making them more effective at a lower cost, even. But it really boils down for defense, military, homeland security, protection of critical infrastructure. It's all about sort of securing, that, and so, doing it for the customer is incredibly valuable, and it's very hard if you got 10 people who have to come together and either try to work with each other, with all your special internal interests, or you just give the customer, say, hey, here's our drone, or here's our ground vehicle, or here's our command and control software. You put it together, right? You don't get anywhere. So I see this as a really important part of accelerating the market and all the value that these systems can provide. Then I'd also add, right, so that's for the go-to-market and interfacing with customers and partners. For us to do this, there's a huge financial benefit, right? We're going to have faster revenue, bigger programs, and we're going to be able to deliver them at lower unit economics, right? So our OpEx per revenue dollar is going to be much greater improved if we're selling a broader system of systems.
Yeah, and I think that touches back on the back end of this next question that I prepared, which basically was, at what point does a system of systems architecture become self-reinforcing, where customers begin to buy the stack rather than individual point solutions?
Yeah, it happens immediately, and you're not necessarily locking in customers, right? Because you need to be modular, and in this environment we need to be able to work with all command and control architectures, for example. So that ecosystem is really important. But in the real world, if you can deliver these solutions, it's a lot easier for the customer to say, hey, we need this capability, and they go to Ondas, as opposed to say, hey, let's find somebody else to develop it. Right. So, this is all kind of part and parcel with the thesis around how the industry is going to organize. And the thesis really started with the customers need it. They need these scaled operators who can deliver these capabilities and integrate them for the customers. They work better. They're more effective. They're more, cost effective as well. And it's just the way the world's going to work.
Yeah, and I think when we start looking at like the border protection architecture with other sovereign customers, how replicable is like that type of template with Ondas, and is each deployment, does it have significant customization?
Yeah, each deployment doesn't necessarily have customization, but the integration can be different, right? So, take the counter drone systems with Iron Drone. We may go to market in Europe, target a homeland security customer for, say, airports, and they may bring different pieces of the puzzle, right? So sometimes we'll go direct. In this example, in Europe, we were working with radar providers, so we bundled it and gave a solution. But they had a specific command and control that they wanted us to plug into that was part of their wider area of security in and around airports. So there's some tailoring. We might go to a different customer and have similar dynamics. So the integrations can be specific, but they become repeatable as well. Once you do this integration with a radar partner or a C2 partner, doing it the next time is a lot easier. So it's not really customized. It's about integration.
No, thank you for touching on it. And last year when I spoke with James, we touched on AUVs and ASVs as potential major future markets. Is that an area Ondas sees itself entering over time, or is the focus staying on the current stack and the environment that you currently focus on?
Sure. So, the maritime vessels, right? USVs are definitely of interest to us. And when and where and how, that all remains to be seen. We have our hands full, right? We've got this active pipeline and a strategy, and I think for us to move into the maritime domain, we're probably looking at a platform company firstly, as opposed to maybe trying to sync something with, say, the stratosphere. But with that said, maybe we'd do the latter too. So we want to have flexibility. That's really important to us. And I guess the takeaway is that certainly we have interest, but stay tuned.
And one of the most important, well, one of the things that really caught my attention was, can you shed some more light on the Shahed interceptor opportunity that was mentioned, and how should investors think about Ondas' potential role there?
Yeah, so we have a few different angles, and maybe I'll outline kind of how we look at it and the opportunities to be involved in the market. But firstly, maybe just give some context as to why it's interesting to us, and perhaps it's obvious, but this is a really important capability, and we're already in the counter drone world, we're in the ISR world, we're in the UAV world. So for us to have a role here, I think makes a lot of sense. And I kind of think about this on the fully kinetic interceptor, that this is really a battlefield. We talk about layers, right? Layers of detection. We have layers on mitigation that range from cyber over RF and jamming and spoofing, two different things, remember, to the net-based interceptor, which is lower collateral impact, soft kinetic, and then there's the full kinetic, right? Full kinetic is a battlefield solution, and it's a critical one. It's a hard one. And by the way, one of the things that you got to keep in mind is it's not when we see these in action, you see essentially a little missile, right? It's a small missile, it's a UAV designed to move super fast. You got to remember that there's a whole infrastructure behind that. It's not just the UAV, it's the command and control, it's the intelligence. Is it autonomous? Is somebody piloting that? How is it integrated into the communications networks, of course, and these are contested environments. So this is very complex technology, but again, it's essential. So for us, I think of it, similar to, say, that the one-way attack drone, the strike drone, the drone dominance type of drones. And to have a role here, not just in the near term, but over the longer term, I think it's relevant to Ondas because it's part of a solutions that the leaders are going to have, once as this industry is organizing. So where do we go? Well, what we were referencing specifically in the earnings call was internal development. So we have an interceptor that we're developing. It's on the cycles here to develop these sorts of drones are actually can be accelerated, from design to testing to deployment, and we are on a fast path there. I think you'll see us doing the testing as soon as this week even. So it's real-time activity. At the same time, we, through our ecosystem, there's all sorts of companies we can invest in, some Ukrainian, and of course, as I referenced there, there's policy and regulations you have to go through. The Ukrainian capabilities have to be, come as systems, right? Just if someone gives you the UAV, try to, put that, with a customer, you're not giving them the solution. They're not able to use it because they have to put the whole thing around it. But then there's some other investments we're making, even in our pipeline, where folks have these capabilities. So I think there's a number of ways we can go about it. And as I told you, the reason we want to have it is I think over the long term, having this capability is important for our customers.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It seems to be the most one of the biggest problems at the moment in that type of sector, for sure.
Yep.
And how has management view of Ondas total addressable market changed following the recent acquisitions and expansion of the platforms?
So, I guess obviously what we have under the tent means that the TAMs are up significantly. But at the same time, I'll tell you, Jay, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about market sizes because they're huge, and we're just really at day one on that adoption curve, and you've heard me articulate why this is going to be an S curve. So the markets are more than large enough for us to have a lot of work to do. And when we acquire something, I've already, because we put our vision out as to how the market's going to organize in our leadership position that we're trying to stake out, they've already in our TAMs as far as I'm concerned, right? So these markets are just huge, but from a very technical standpoint, when you bring it in, for some people, it seems like we've expanded our markets, but I'm already kind of thinking about when we're growing the business, adding new TAMs, I guess, formally, as opposed to sort of vision wise.
No, I appreciate that. And thank you very much. And let's say, for instance, if an airport operator or an oil refinery wanted to produce an autonomous ISR counter UAS system today with yourselves, what would that process look like from the first engagement to delivery? And are these systems typically built to order, or are they available for rapid deployment?
Yeah. So they're not built to order, really. So they're available. Maybe one of the questions is how much inventory do we hold, so we can, which will of course impact ship times. And we are working, of course, to always have as much visibility as possible on demand, so we're not surprised. So you see us build inventory, over the course of time, but with high velocity, because we're mapping that to our high velocity of turnover, because we're mapping that to what we see as demand in our pipeline. The short answer is, how long does, from a customer to order to install, really it depends is the answer. I'll highlight that in the fourth quarter we made one, and then we made another announcement around orders for Iron Drone at airports in Europe, major international airports, and those were required urgently. So we were installed within 30 days there, and that was something that was very important to the customer. So that's some context. I'd also add that again, so it depends. So sometimes we'll get an order, for example, Optimus systems to be deployed across military bases, and the customer may want to do it sequentially. So we'll have that visibility, and so there's if you think about our backlog and orders, if it's a new order, new customer, sometimes it's a longer integrations, right? That customer, when they expand, right, it's much quicker, right? They've got the experience, we have the experience, we've been in their operations, so they can move through that infrastructure build out more quickly once they get the first order under the belt.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Thank you, and I appreciate that. And it's nice to know actually how quick that airport order went through. That's very, I'd say 30 days is quite a really quick transition, to be fair, for such complex systems, really, for what they need. Now, this question goes back into a little bit about what we was talking about before, about how the dynamic of messages to yourself, etc., will change from when they're up to down. So how does yourself and management think about using stock as a strategy currency for acquisitions, even when cash is available? Because that's part of the problem that I see with what people don't actually understand is they see a PR and think the stock's going to shoot up through the moon, but the realization is because stock was used, they don't really understand why it does, why that's happening.
Yeah. So this is important, and I'm going to try to be very clear. Now, some people will have different.
I get it.
There, but the issue. Firstly, the issue around stock versus cash is, as always, it depends. Each deal is a little different. I do like to use equity to align incentives, and very often the counterparties want equity. Now, when we're acquiring a business, that business typically has investors with different time horizons. It also has leadership teams, right, who have equity. And on balance, what you see is we would tilt. And of course, it's always a value. The valuation is of Ondas and our currency is always part of the equation as well, and I can unpack that a bit. But you got to remember that we're acquiring companies that had been startups. They mature the businesses, and many of those investors were looking to hit home runs, right? It was like, this was a risky investment. They had success, and they want to realize the benefits of that. And as you heard me articulate in the markets, there's capital constraint on many of these companies, right? Not necessarily the guys you hear about, the Andrels and the Shield AIs. They're different, right? The markets that we're in, there's capital constraint. So, and they're not, this exit isn't necessarily the end for them, right? They want to build the business as part of Ondas. They see Ondas as a platform company that is going to build a tremendous, amount of equity value and compound that, as we've argued. So they want to play. So, and of course, aligning incentives there, both at the outset and with management compensation, that's really important, right? So that's one thing. Secondly, I will tell you that we will use cash and stock, and there's certain deals in our pipeline that will be entirely the cash deals. what does that mean for market reaction and reception? I will tell you, I feel very strongly every single deal we have done has been massively accretive. Now, we haven't necessarily seen the stock go up on that day, and as we said earlier, sometimes, and I sat on your side of the table, Jay, for a long time. We use this term: price follows narrative. When the stock's down, Eric's diluting us, right? What is he doing? He's crazy. He doesn't know, he doesn't know what he's doing. And then, of course, if you're sort of in this upcycle, I'll get too much credit. It's like he's a wizard, and it's like, I just tell you, I cannot emphasize enough. These deals have been accretive, and we really spent some time on the conference call telling you how the values does create it and get compounded. But on day one, we were worth more after every single deal we've done, and I think substantially more. And I think we're going to prove that out. Another thing I'll tell you is I think the onus is on the management team, of course, to articulate why this is valuable. And I'll say sometimes when we're issuing press releases, there might be competitive reasons, there might be customer-related reasons, or specific to the investors themselves, so who are acquiring the companies, that we can't necessarily share all the financial details that we would like, so that we can quite clearly sort of do the measurement for you as an investor as to what is this accretion. So with that said, I do, what we did in the last call, that was a foreign force to do that. So I described, the businesses we acquired. I told you where the revenues were in 2026 versus the acquisition price. I think that was a very, very attractive valuations, getting outstanding businesses. I'll make a statement that I think the Worldview deal is worth at least what our market cap is today. I think you're going to see that, right? Incredible, right? And because Worldview is substantially more valuable as part of Ondas, and Ondas by extension is more valuable because we're Worldview, and you can make that case with everything we've done, but Worldview is a great example. So we have to, certainly do a good job in messaging. And at some level, Jay, if we execute and you see this and it's tangible, investors are going to trust us, right? And that's a lot to ask, but that comes back to the transparency, the communication. And if you believe that the model is right, that our thesis on the market is right, that we have the right leadership team, we have the right financial model and platform, it shouldn't be that hard to trust us. And you see us working 24/7. We put everything into this, and I couldn't believe in it more. So there's never one day I'll wake up and say, how do I dilute our investors today? It's the opposite. How do we accrete and compound value? And that's 100% what I wake up every day trying to do.
And I think there's two ways more of looking at it. What I try and pull across to a lot of people on the forums when these things happen is, one is these companies won't want stock if they didn't believe in the vision as well. They would want all cash. There wouldn't be cash involved. It'd just be all cash. Like, the fact that they accept stock as part of that deal means they have the same type of vision and belief as well. And the flip side of that as well is obviously, I think some people have got too much short notice on it, and obviously they just think that overnight they're going to be millionaires. And if you press that 1 year button on the stock and you look at the percentage, I know it moves up and down, but at some point we're like 1,300% up in a year, and some other parts were 900. So what do you actually expect on a day-to-day basis? So I think the generation of investors that we have nowadays, sometimes patience isn't really there. But obviously I wanted to get a bit of a detailed explanation so they can sort of hear it from the horse's mouth exactly why you do what you do.
Those are great points. And if I could just add on this, I think when we're engaging with the institutional investors, and I make this argument, I think it resonates a lot. And I think there's another reason why you're going to see the investor base deepen and broaden. And it's going to be good. It's going to be good for all of us. And I think I really don't like commenting on the stock price. You will very rarely hear me do that because the market is volatile. The only thing I will say is that I do believe the shares will be volatile, but I also believe we're going to be in a nice uptrend for a number of years. So, but I think investors will look at this decline here, which is not just, it's not about Ondas as much as it's about markets and market dynamics and things like oil prices, etc. They're looking at it as an opportunity, particularly because if you think about how the company's transformed, it's really significant, right? And we are now the shares are trading at a very low multiple.
Yeah, agreed. And we've worked out a lot of maths on our side as well, and we're all comfortable with what we hold and what we do. And but I think obviously for the newer guys that don't understand much, that answer helps probably, I wouldn't say soothe them a little bit, but give them a little bit more confidence in the fact that what's happening is right.
Sure.
And for another onto that one, how does management think about revenue concentration risks across the broader platforms, especially as several of the acquired business have got small number but of large contracts, tenders, or framework opportunities?
Yeah. So again, thinking about where we've come year over year, it's clearly Israel and the government agencies and defense branches in Israel are important parts of the revenue. At the same time, we've transformed. I mean, we've got huge diversification by technology platform. We have huge, and we showed 4 verticals, right, on our conference call. So it's ISR, it's counter drone, it's loitering munitions, and of course it's ground vehicles, right? So we're diversified by product, markets. We're now diversified by geographies, right? We've added Worldview and Mistral, and all of a sudden that's accelerating, both the near-term business opportunities and scale, but also providing an avenue for us to compound growth much more quickly in the U.S. because these are platform businesses we're acquiring. They have customers, they have people in the field, they have production, right? Same thing in Europe. We have Heidelberg, we have Rotron. In both of the U.S. and Europe, you're going to see significant strategic activity. That's both M&A, it's also investment, it's partnerships, and that's just going to strengthen those businesses. So I see us being today, actually diversified by technology platform, by customers, but also by geography. And I think you're going to see more of that, and that's just making us a stronger business.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and thank you for touching on that as well, Eric. And on this question here, so obviously in regards to like FIFA contracts, etc., stuff like that, has the DHS shutdown created any timing or administrative headwinds for Ondas around government-related opportunities?
The short, so not really, and I don't think the DHS shutdowns have really slowed the FIFA stuff down. In fact, there's activity there. Let me put it that way. And just more broadly, I tend to not get overly focused. I know particularly for traders, this is sort of news, right? And it can create volatility, but we're building the business for the long term. And I think if we look back 5-10 years from now, we're not going to remember shutdowns or continuing resolutions. So it can create inefficiencies. So and this is not just in the near term. This goes back to late last year. So some of the testing and integration work we were doing was deferred, but that just shortens the cycle for delivery at the same time because the customers need you to perform. So I don't really think it has, other than a very near term impact on the business, which is again now diversified. I don't see that as a big concern. And I spend my time thinking about the operating platform and how we're going to perform over the next 12-24 months.
No, I appreciate that. And the last couple of questions on the network side of things. Ondas networks remain a very small part of the revenue today. What specific milestones in 26 would show that the business is moving in from strategic promise to meaningful commercial traction?
Yeah, great. So the 900 megahertz network obviously has been a disappointment from timelines. I mean, we put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in that. I can tell you on a personal level, we've done that. We've spent, we've invested a lot of capital. Now we've tried to make sure we're limiting that until we get something in return from the customers, and I think we are. So, but 900 megahertz is still out there. We still think there's opportunity. At the same time, the work we've done on 900 megahertz, what we said on this call today, is that the AAR now has or is it signal the intent. I don't know if they may have formalized it in the last week or so as well, but there'll be some formalization where 802.16 will be the wireless technology chosen for all private networks on the roadmap that are owned by the AAR. So that obviously is a great place to be. The question comes back to, as always, when. right? Because when and the question is not, if, it's going to be when. And the question is not, is it material or not, or is it meaningful business worth doing? Because nothing's small with the railroads, right? These are continental networks. So where I see, and we focus this on the call, is the 160 networks actually likely to leapfrog 900 in its importance. And the customers like 160 because of there's a few reasons. So firstly, it's their most ubiquitous coverage. So every inch of the rail across the continent is covered by 160 megahertz. Okay. So secondly, they have the most channel bandwidth. So the capacity of that network is, I'll call it the theoretical, and then I'll tell you why it's not theoretical anymore. The theoretical capacity by the channel bandwidth means that 160 is the highest capacity. And thirdly, the propagation of that network is the greatest. So low frequency bands propagate, you get more distance. That means it's the most efficient to deploy and operate, and can be the most cost effective vis-a-vis the other networks. So it's a really important network to them and very valuable real estate when we think about radio spectrum as infrastructure. So, we've been working with them, and Marcus Nodelman and our team are doing a great job with multiple use cases. So that's this gets back to why .16 is so important. That is a land mobile radio network, also the push to talk critical voice network, and it's essential. Critical voice is critical. But it is legacy, and it's very in these LMR networks, we slice these channels down to really, really narrow 5 kilohertz channels. What that means is you're getting 9.2 kilobits of throughput. It's that's all you need for voice. We can go in and aggregate those channels and create massive capacity so they can have a voice and data over IP network, and that's what we're pursuing. So they're going to do all sorts of train control and signaling and safety systems. Safety, many folks will remember the hot box detector. That's just one of many. They could put that on 160 with high reliability. There's some really important and valuable inspection work that the rails are doing, where they're taking the locomotives and the train systems and putting LiDAR and other sensors on the trains and getting incredible, but they're getting really valuable inspection data. However, the timeliness of that data is very difficult to capture because it's such a bandwidth, it's such high volumes. You're talking about terabits of data. Getting that off the locomotive into the central office so decisions can make is very hard. So those are the sorts of things that we're working on 160. Marcus has talked about that quite a bit over the last, I'll say 2, 3, maybe 4 quarters. And I do think, we're going to see some success there. So, but at the end of the day, it's still, worth fighting for. And I think we're going to get some good positive outcomes for our investors, later than we wanted for sure. But fortunately, we've been able to build the OAS business in parallel.
Yeah, no, and as Ondas evolves, is there ever a scenario where the networks business is separated or structured differently from the rest of the platform, or do you see it strategically important to keep it in the broader Ondas ecosystem?
Yeah, so we always retain flexibility. And I think the first order of business here is to create the value in Ondas networks, and to demonstrate that. That means to get adoption. Once we see adoption, we have tremendous optionality. So that optionality could be spin-off. Ondas networks could become a mission-critical IoT player, with applications at the edge as well, which I think is really important, or it could be potentially, a really interesting path for us to go, both internally, but also from an independent company standpoint. Or we could just, once the path to profitability, and in fact, substantial profitability for Ondas networks is not that hard, right? Once they start to build networks, our OpEx leverage, very limited R&D needed to incremental R&D needed, very little sales and marketing dollars needed. So the margins will be very nice. So could be a cash generator to fund, other expansions. But, so I want to, Jay, keep that optionality. But let me also be clear, there's the industrial logic that put them together is not particularly strong. So if we saw a path to greater value creation by spinning it off and Ondas Networks becoming an independent company, led by Marcus, we would be more than happy to do that if it's good for shareholders.
And I appreciate you touching on it. I know we touched on it literally briefly on the last interview, so I wanted to get a little bit more about your thought on that. Eric, like I really, really appreciate all the questions that you've answered for me. And one last quick one, I don't know if you're going to be able to do it off the top of your head before you finish, is last interview.
Yes.
You gave me a book idea. So it was this book. So this one was the one you had. I've started reading it. I've read about a third of it. I haven't read it all, so I won't lie to you. But a lot of the guys inside of like the Discords and everything like that, they really enjoy the options that everybody gives them. Have you got another one for the guys to dig into?
Yeah, so I'll give you two.
Let's have it.
And they're on the table behind me. I'm not sure I'm going to get the titles right. And these aren't necessarily investor books, but they're very relevant for our sector. So I think last year, Alex Karp at Palantir wrote a book called the Technological Republic or something like that. I think that's very interesting and topical for the world we live in today. And then just last week, the CTO of Palantir, Shyam Sankar, he also published a book around mobilization of the defense industrial base. I think both of those are interesting. And I'll go back to my archives, Jay, and give you something more specific on the investing side. But you took me by surprise. And I love the investment books. I have a whole stack of them, and admittedly, I buy a lot, and because I'm 24/7 Ondas. I don't get to read them all. So one day I'm going to have this big stack of books I have to tear through.
Maybe one day when you get to retire, or something, and calm down a little bit.
That's way down the road. So I try to, I'm aspirational. I see these books, and there's so much I want to consume, but at the same time, I'm consuming Ondas, and I do have my priorities. I promise you.
No, I appreciate it. And Eric, from behalf of myself and everybody that you do communicate with, and obviously everybody on the individual investor side, we really appreciate everything you do, and thank you very much for taking your time.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay. We'll talk again soon.